When I started working on this game, I wanted to get more familiar with the engine and finally break my cycle of making a prototype and ditching it. So, this video will be mainly about some things I learned from the project, but I'll just give a quick recap of the game. It's a simple runner where you steer a rover up an infinite hill. The seasons pass as you play, and some seasons have specific hazards and obstacles that you must avoid. With each passing year the game throws more of these hazards at you. Okay, with that out of the way, I want to look at what code I've ripped out and saved for later. I wanted it to be something I could reuse and add new functionality to, so I mainly had the solid principles in mind. These are some helpful principles to keep in mind when you are programming to make sure everything doesn't become a mess. I won't go into too much detail, but I'll go over the relevant few principles I had in mind here. The main one I had in mind is the OpenClose Principle, since the code I'm saving for later is going to be very general and something that can be used in any game in the future. The OpenClose Principle says that classes should be closed for modification but open for extension. Let's say I have a toaster that toasts bread. That's good. I can slap a finished stamp on it and pack it up. If I then want to make it so my toaster can also boil an egg, then I don't do anything to the original toaster. Instead, I make a new toaster that has the same functionality, but I add another piece to it, so I can always go back to the original and maybe make other branches of modification to it. With that in mind, I have two files that I made some changes to, so the code was a bit cleaner. Technically three, but two of them are very similar. The multi-audio player 3D, and packed scene spawner. The multi-audio players are pretty simple. There's a list of audio that they can play, so some other piece of code can just say play your second sound. It's basically a sound box. Since the Godot audio stream players are for one sound only, where you have to switch the sound out if you want to play something different, this multi-audio player acts as a manager for that, telling the audio stream player to change tracks and play or stop the track. The packed scene spawner is somewhat similar in idea. It is a spawner that has a list of things, in this case packed scenes, which in Godot is a collection of objects ordered in a hierarchy, that it can spawn when it is given a position and being told what from the list to spawn. It will spawn that into the current scene at that position. This was used for the events in the game like lightning and the falling rocks. The other principle I want to quickly look at is the S in solid, the single responsibility principle. This principle is mainly about making sure classes are not dealing with too many different things. So in the case of the multi-audio player, it is only doing very few specific things, and those things all have to do with managing and editing an audio stream player. So in that sense, the multi-audio player will only need to be fixed or changed if something is different about the audio stream player, and because of that, I will instantly know where the error is if something goes wrong with it. That does it for the code part. Right now I have these pieces I can extend from in the future or just reuse as is, as they are fairly general. Some other quick lessons. I figured out a bit later in the project that I should have used the scene hierarchy a bit better. The main game logic was at the same level as most other objects, which means the game logic object, which was the manager of all objects, had to first call up, find the root of the scene, and then search the scene below for certain things like the player and the UI. I also didn't really follow much of any conventions recommended by the Godot documentation for most of the code, and in general it had become a bit messy to work with. So afterwards I dug into the documentation again and followed that for the pieces of code I took out of the project. All in all, it was a success. I achieved my goal of at least releasing something, and I learned more about using Godot, and I got some code out of it that I can use for later. You can find the link to the game in the description below. If you want to follow the development of future projects, just click the subscribe button and stay tuned to this channel. Thank you for watching.